Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the introductions, Ruth. Very kind. The question really is, how do we create these cities of the future that we now have in our mind's eye, as it were? And how do we create the opportunities for UK firms in creating these cities of the future? So if you will, would you imagine that you might be the mayor of a major advanced economy city? You might be feeling quite pleased with yourself. You've developed a mass transport system. You've got rail and air links into your city. You've got a great and thriving technology and commercial property hub. And your education and research is doing very well in the indices. And you've even got a natural risk management plan for any sort of natural disasters that might come along. But the trouble is, cities are advancing. The sort of post-advanced economy city is actually more focused on the citizen. The cities of the past have been more focused on the sort of infrastructure push. What we need to do in the future is look more from a citizen's point of view. Because in actual fact, cities are competing for resources. Cities are the sort of heart of wealth creation. And cities are competing with each other to attract great talent. And so what cities are starting to do is to turn their attention to how do we attract that talent. And so things like eco-living are becoming more important. The green spaces that we create within our cities. The environment and the air quality are becoming much more important. How do we build the culture into our city and the leisure and the elderly care? How will we look after their older people as their health potentially deteriorates? And there's business opportunities here as well. So in the UK we have many advanced economy cities. But actually we've got a big retrofit problem if we're going to move them to these sort of quality of life cities. So there's business opportunities for UK firms there. There's also countries there in the Middle East that are sort of new cities are rising out of the ground, jumping straight to these quality of life cities. And UK firms can play their part there too. And there's also developing nations as well, which are trying to leapfrog some of the stages that we went through ourselves. And how can we help them develop their cities as well. So again, some potential opportunity for UK firms in those spaces. And this resonates really strongly with the fourth industrial revolution as well. It was touched on in the previous session, but it's this bringing together of the physical, the city systems, the transport, the energy systems that we've got, and the digital, this big disruptor in this fourth industrial revolution that we're talking about here. So in the previous session we talked about digital manufacturing, digital construction, where we use digital for the design and then digital for the construction and manufacturing. Let's take that digital thread even further as we run and operate our cities, and actually in the feedback loop so that we can design better cities in the future as well. And of course this data, we can use this data to manage our cities and for us to sort of track our transport around cities as well, this sort of more dynamic city. And the biological. Let's not forget, us humans are biological. We're a big part of the city. That's why we have these cities. Our smart watches are starting to tell us, when we're running into sort of our blood sugar levels are running a little low, we might need to take some food on. But in future, these devices are going to start to tell us, our healthcare needs, when we should go for a checkup, and if we might have any difficult conditions that need to be looked after. And this is where we start sort of merging and blending in the hospital of the future. How does that sit within the city of the future? And in future, might we be using autonomous vehicles to bring people to hospital and those types of things? And there's a whole session, of course, tomorrow on the hospital of the future. So that really accords, and the real challenge for us in cities is how do we work in this new sort of industrial revolution and bring these three things together to create these very citizen-centric cities that we're looking to create. So this looks like quite a big global number. We've got to put that's the projection for 2020 on the slide. But already in the UK, there's a £3 billion market in smart city infrastructure. In reality, it's about 2 to 5% of infrastructure spend, but it's the sort of high-value, smart digital part of the infrastructure spend. We're not so interested in the concrete pouring and those sort of things, but the real challenge is how do we integrate, when we build these big infrastructure projects, how do we actually integrate these smart aspects? And the UK is well positioned. We're very strong at this precision engineering, blending in the digital and those sorts of things. We've got fantastically creative firms as well who can really work on the user experience, because we've got to develop that in early as well. We've got fantastic architecture firms, engineering type firms, and all of those. And we've also got really backed up by our city as well, which provides the finance and the legal and the insurance that go behind these. And UK firms are already out there around the world developing cities for other countries. But how do we take that next step to these advanced economy, post-advanced economy cities? But there are barriers. It's difficult. I mean, we're told the fourth industrial revolution has started, and we're starting to see this in our handheld devices. We're starting to see what it's sort of occurring in digital photography. But actually, cities are big and complex, and they're going to be towards the back end of this, this industrial revolution. So there's a lot of barriers in the way. Cities are big and complex. We're going to have to break down that complexity. They're capital intensive. These projects are big, hairy, audacious projects often. And there's also, we've got to keep people safe as we're changing these systems, and we've got to keep kind of the wheels on the bus as we're changing the bus. We've got to keep people flowing and moving. And it's going to take new thinking. We can't do it in the way that we have done it before. We're going to have to bring different types of players together. We're going to have to understand value chains, possibly new types of business models, work with investors, those types of things. So that's part of our role at Innovate UK, working strongly with the Future Cities Catapult to break down these barriers, to lower these barriers of entry, because that's the difficult bit, sort of market making as I call it. How do we set up the market so that the companies can flow in? At this stage it's a little early, it's hard. You need some public sector help, and this is the role that we play. I think there are two key things that I think are quite important as we move forward. We're not going to roll out, big city systems, straight off the bat. We're going to have to trial them, we're going to have to test them, we're going to have demonstrators, test beds, whatever you might want to call them. We've got to think through these test beds. In the past it might have been quite tech push, and we might have forgotten some of those more subtle aspects. So how do we actually build our demonstrators such that we actually deploy them in cities? So I think we've got to start with the end in mind. I think we've got to start with who's going to buy these systems if we do the demonstrator. So who are going to be the procurers? Maybe the cities themselves or the utility firms. Who are going to be the investors in these sort of smart digital creative companies that are actually going to help those companies grow and kind of mix this space up? Let's start with those guys. Let's bring in design people so that we actually really design these cities for the citizens of the future. And let's not forget the standards and regulations people. These new cities are going to challenge those things, and we need to, the regulators need to innovate as well, and they know that. Let's get them involved in the demonstration as well. And let's get that sort of rich connection of different players before we start thinking what technologies we're going to put in there, so that we start thinking in a very different way. And then the opportunity, of course, is a more global opportunity. There's a very big market out there for the UK know-how as we develop it, but also these precision engineering type solutions that we can be so very strong at. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight. I think I've provided a sort of an optimistic idea of the opportunities, and we're coming up to a panel session where I think Keith is going to sort of talk about some of the real world challenges of building our cities of the future.
I am now.
Oh yeah, very good.
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks, Cheers.
Thank you. Good morning, my name's Keith Clark. I'm privileged to be the chair of Future Cities Catapult. And that's a great privilege, actually, to be involved in something that is so difficult. And it's not just because we have a catapult called Future Cities, it's because we have a variety of catapults, including transportation, which Steve is the CEO of, working together. And the characteristic of cities is they're highly inconvenient organizations. They don't work as silos terribly well. And to be a smart city, and I don't know any mayor or mayoress who actually wants a dumb city, although many of them actually are, for good reasons. It's hard to be smart. It's about integration across inconvenient disciplines, and the catapult families are actually not in competition, they are to complement each other, and the role of Innovate UK to enable that is fantastic. In fact, there's a chairs meeting, I think next week, of all the chairs of Catapult to continue this push. Now, let's go to the context. The context is we're 7.4 billion people. We are going to get to 9.5 to 11 billion people on the planet. 70% of those are going to be urban. That's where they're going to be. That means that we're going to have about another, in that context, 3 or 4 billion people who are going to become middle class urban people. And they're going to want a fridge. and they're going to want electricity and water and safety and sanitation and transportation to have a choice of job and a choice of recreation. They are going to want the middle class life that everybody here has. Fantastic challenge. Fantastic challenge. Actually, it's the wrong challenge. Because if we do that the way we have done the last 50 years, which for many people have been successful, and for some people miserably unsuccessful, and actually if you're a young child in London at the moment getting asthma, it's unsuccessful for them because of air quality. And that's true in Delhi, and it's true in many parts of China. In fact, we have a delegation from China here today because of Future Cities Catapult and Innovate's program. If we continue to answer the question the way we have done in the past, we will be at a 4-degree world. And then the issue of being smart actually becomes one of stopping migration, of defending those cities that can adapt. So the mitigation of climate change is fundamental to the way we develop cities. And that means you have to innovate. Not only do we have to innovate, but we have to innovate at a rate which we don't normally do as a society unless we're at war. We could develop the Merlin engine 15 times in 6 years. We are going to have to develop the way we run and manage cities to cope with all the challenges of aging population, energy scarcity, water scarcity, air quality, social deprivation, AI coming and taking out simple jobs, revolutions in the way we run our society and the economy itself. All of those are going to go on. And by the way, we are going to radically decarbonize the way we provide the lifeblood of cities, which is energy, which enables all those things at the same time. And we're going to do it in terms of infrastructure in the next 20 years, because we have to be decarbonized by 80% in the UK by 2050. And that means now. It means right now. So the opportunities for innovation, if you're optimistic, are fantastic. The skill sets in the UK are fantastic. The sophistication of local government in the UK is actually one of the better ones in the world, and I've worked in most places. We have all the cards. So why can't we innovate at that rate? How can we move from phenomenally good practice to a game-changing practice that gets us to another place in the future? And that's the very near future. And I'm proud to say I think we've just ratified the Climate Change Agreement. We have the only world act on climate change. The UK has led the way on this. We have phenomenal skills in both this diplomacy, in the Grantham Institute, in East Anglia, the Tyndale Centre, etc., etc. Phenomenal skills in urban planning and engineering and finance and insurance. We have all the cards. We have entrepreneurs. We have institutions like the Ordnance Survey. Fantastic game. So why don't we do it? Why don't we do it differently than before? So let's talk about what's inhibiting us. What would really make the game change? And if I could ask Julie from Siemens to start and introduce yourself, and we'll work our way along.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Alexander. I'm Director for Urban Development at Siemens and leading on the Smart Cities topic. So I'd just like to come back to the point that was just made around the fact that our city populations are growing, and how do we accommodate that growth, and how do we do that sustainably? Well, taking the topic of transportation and a project that we all know very well, the largest infrastructure project in Europe, Crossrail. Crossrail is an amazing project, will add 10% capacity to public transportation within London. But with the growth that's coming to London between now and 2030, several million more people in London, that's still not going to be sufficient capacity on the public transportation network. We'll need an extra 30% capacity to move people around the city, to stop the city coming to a halt. And how do we do that? Well, we do that through digitalisation. If we could digitalise the entire metro in the London Underground, we would add 30% capacity, which would mean that we wouldn't have to make all that additional investment on tunnelling, extra rolling stock, and so on. But that really comes with problems that we find hard to deal with. For instance, driverless trains, a very political issue. But if we digitalise the railway, we take people off the roads, we reduce carbon, we clean the air, we save energy. So we don't do these projects to put people out of jobs. We do it because we need to grow in a sustainable way. And actually with digitalisation, there are so many more jobs out there. The lack of engineers that we have in the country, the lack of computer scientists, really we're going to have to bridge that gap if we're going to tackle this digital and technology revolution and to accommodate this growing population, this elderly population at the same time.
Thank you. Just if we can just move along and then we'll go for a general discussion. Ben.
Just a short introduction.
Yeah, join the discussion.
So
your bit.
Thank you. I work at a company called IP Group. We build businesses predominantly out of universities in the UK. I'm in the clean tech team. And really that means that I see a lot of companies that are highly relevant to smart cities, because I think smart cities offers the opportunity for cities to deliver on their environmental goals. And as was introduced in the beginning, environmental stresses from cities will be a massive problem if we don't get ahead of it. And so the set of companies that I look at are pretty consistently relevant to the layering of Internet of Things on smart cities, which for right now is predominantly what people are talking about when they talk about smart cities. Later I can reflect on where I think future ways of innovation will come relevant to smart cities, but I'll leave that as just a basic introduction about what I do.
Thank you. Miranda.
We use the power of location data to digitally enable economies and enable them to compete. That is looking to instrument this part of Corridor Manchester. And the areas that we're particularly interested in are the integration of things like connected autonomous vehicles, the 5G and advanced telecoms, as well as the blending the inside and the outside world in a digital and built Britain.
Thank you. Chris, we're working our way along.
Hello, I'm Chris Taylor from Mastodon C, where I'm Head of Commercial Development. We're a big data and data science company with expertise in cities, and we're currently building a data sharing and modelling platform that we've deployed so far across London. I guess a couple of the themes that had been picked up so far, I suppose one of the things that I believe quite strongly about how to achieve a sustainable future is the need to make sure that it's not just about putting in the right sort of hard infrastructure, it's also about enabling behaviour change amongst citizens or responding to people's desires for behaviour change, which one can latch onto by taking a very user-centred approach to designing services and being able to iterate very quickly through the process of doing that. So hope you can come back to some of those themes.
Steve, last but not least by any means.
Good morning, I'm Steve Yarney, I'm the Chief Executive of the Transport Systems Catapult. And in a nutshell, what we try to do is to make stuff happen by demonstrating new transport system solutions. And I look forward to telling you more about that in the conversation.
I'm now going to pick on Ian again. Is this a technology problem, or is it just people being inconvenient? What's stopping us leaping forward with innovation? Is it politics? Is it training? Is it what's our big barrier?
I mean, I think, as I said in my presentation, I think they're just big challenges. If we're looking to, even change the area around Victoria, or I came through Birmingham yesterday, Birmingham New Street. Those sorts of projects are massive, and they require so many different players. There's investors involved in them, maybe lots of different construction firms, lots of different facets to design. I think it's an organisational challenge. But we also need that organisational leadership as well. As you rightly say, Keith, there's some much bigger problems. It's not just about delivering these fantastic environments. There's also things, we've got to think about population changes. We need to considering the environment. I think there's a good example. I mean, last night I came through Birmingham New Street. It's fantastic. Compared to what it was in the old days, it kind of felt like a city of the future in some ways, the sort of place where people want to visit. But I must say, and this is nothing against Birmingham, there's lots like this, down on the platforms, the air quality was still the same as it was previously, and it was quite toxic down there. So, when we build these cities in the future, we need to consider these things. Yes, it looks beautiful, but actually, how do we tackle some of these bigger problems? And I think it's an organisational challenge that we kind of need to all gather ourselves and just face the challenge.
Can I just pick up, is this something where the clients aren't good enough to realise what the private sector can offer? Or is it, why can't we get more quality? I mean, Birmingham New Street, the day it opened I was there, and it was full of people who were dressed up proud to be Birmingham, going out
Yep,
for
that's good.
a sushi in the. It was fantastic atmosphere. You know, they were really proud of it. And the platforms are terrible, and the circulation doesn't work. Apart from that, neither of us can go back to Birmingham. Where is the weakness? Okay, where is it? Private sector not selling the wrong thing, or government local not buying? Where? Oh, sorry. Come on.
I would say that there's multiple things going on. These are big, complex projects, and in the defence of cities or whoever that end customer might be, we have a lot of processes here in the UK that we have to go through to get these projects underway. And let's not forget they're there for a good reason. So participatory consultation, the planning system, public procurement processes, all of these things take time. But notwithstanding that, I think now that we're moving into this digital age, there is certainly a role where cities and the private sector can get together and really talk about these technologies that are coming through. There probably isn't enough of that. But one of the reasons for that is the public procurement process. So where is that open forum and that meeting ground where the private sector can really understand some of the challenges cities are facing, can explain the reasons why certain things need to be implemented in these big contracts and that they're not missed out in the value engineering process. So I would say that it's not that I think the best will in the world, these projects always come together with great minds and great technology and great customers, but really unless that dialogue is there from the outset and things aren't slashed out the project at the 11th hour, then we're not going to see some of the successes that we could be realising, because I think it was mentioned, we have great skills, great technology. The cities of the UK really are very sophisticated. My role is global, and the best discussions, the best conversations are happening here in the UK. It's just a question of understanding the value that comes from delivering the best in the world, and that costs money, and maybe what we have to do actually is look at new business models to be able to deliver some of these things.
Just for those who don't know what value engineering means, it means arbitrarily cutting scope halfway through the project because you can't fess up to the fact you're over budget and losing most of the actual benefits. So the discussions on High Speed 2, which is about what its capex is, no one's talked about its opex, which will be for 50 years. No one's talked about, by having stations and other investments, which Heseltine's talks about, you get leverage. No, we talk about cutting the odd billion out of it and then lose the benefits. So the holistic, so you're absolutely right. Value engineering does not mean value engineering in 99.9, it means arbitrary political face saving and losing future benefits. That's a fairly well established definition. Ben, if you... Sorry.
It's realistic.
Follow that.
I think,
Ben, you
following from Julie's point, I don't think we invest enough in our local authorities. I think if I worked in a local authority, I would be scared about something comparable to NHS IT infrastructure upgrades and not quite hitting things as well. I think we need to build institutional capabilities at the local authority level to execute 10 to 20 year plans that you can build smart cities around, because it's short-term pop-up little measures won't really get the change that we need to have happen. So, it needs institutional capacity within the local authority. You can't just outsource everything to consultants. I think, for me, that's the bedrock of getting things to happen, and doing it in a smart, digital, dynamic way that enables these institutions not to become a bureaucratic nightmare, but to execute plans well. Basically.
Just the interface between public and private, do you think it's in the right place, or there should be more public? Do you think outsourcing's gone? I mean, we seem to have outsourced everything, including policy, or lack thereof.
I don't think there's enough institutional capacity within local authorities. I think we've cut the budgets too much, and it's very difficult for people to work long enough on single projects to make long-term plans. So, on balance, I think the balance either side right of public or private. I think you definitely need private support because you'll get different experts. I just think the volume of activity isn't enough. I think you need more activity in the local authorities to be able to do better work.
Miranda?
I mean, I would agree with Ben, and the other thing I think is we're taking quite a Victorian approach to a 21st century problem in our approach to building infrastructure. You know, the electromagnetic spectrum is finite, and therefore the way we plan advanced telcos is going to need an entirely different approach. Cycle lanes are fantastic. I flew down the embankment on the Boris bike lane yesterday and loved it, but we fundamentally affected the resilience of our transport system by enabling new methods of travelling about. Even with Julie's fantastic digital railway, we can't just keep boring more tunnels and building more cycle lanes. We're going to need to be much more flexible in the way that problems are approached, and those are going to require behaviour change, and that's, you know, a very hard thing whether you're public or private. I think the best way to do that is by giving people and innovators more data and more ways of integrating that data. Then we're going to get a much better chance of having a solution.
Ben, can I ask you, is it my behaviour that's the problem as a sort of city dweller? Am I just irrational here? Or, you know, I behave the way I do because I'm an old guy that, you know, just can't quite work an iPhone properly and understands an Oyster card because they gave me, you know, you tell me I've got to be different? Why am I going to be different, you know? What's the behavioural issue? How do we deal with this? And cross-cultural behavioural issues, because I might not be a white Anglo-Saxon guy that's lived in London, I might be somebody else who's new.
So I think part of this is about the way that new services and systems are designed. I guess when you're talking about procurement, that sounds like quite a sort of long, drawn-out experience over many years to build big chunks of infrastructure. But I guess you see technology enabling completely new service models emerging very rapidly, which don't require a big sort of procurement process. So things like new approaches to taxi provisioning, or designing new ways to enable people to provide food to their elderly neighbours. You know, there are lots of really interesting examples like this where you can improve the quality of life and hopefully reduce the carbon impact of cities without it having to be something that involves a lot of pouring of concrete. But I think making those kinds of things work, it's really essential to engage directly with the kinds of people who are actually going to use the services to make sure that they're designed in such a way that it meets their needs. So we'd come and have a workshop with you and talk about what you actually need in your nice warm house with someone coming around to give you meals and that kind of thing.
I don't know what I need, I just need more of it quicker, cheaper. Okay. You know, it's the general, you know, why don't I have it now? But Steve, are you optimistic about technology being adopted in transport systems? Because transport for me is what gives me choice. Yes. Choice of employment, choice of recreation, you know, it gives me freedom. Yeah. Affordable transportation.
I'm very optimistic, and I see opportunities rather than problems. And I said at the beginning, you know, we try to make stuff happen, and that's very much the way that we've approached the issues that are facing us. So, you know, I agree with the comments made so far. You know, growing urban populations create challenges, but that to me reads big opportunity. And you know, in a relatively short period of time, we've been able to demonstrate some very innovative solutions in connecting transport systems together. So the driverless pods trial that we have now reached the culmination of by demonstrating in public, with the public and with the media, full autonomous driverless control of a small vehicle in Milton Keynes. Fantastic solution for the last mile of a journey. So all of our journeys are multimodal, and the stress points tend to be at the interconnections between different modes. So you drive to your railway station, you go on the train, you then may get on a bus for your final destination. All of those transitions create problems. And by opening up choice and providing information to people, we can offer new solutions. And that driverless pod trial is really about demonstrating one application of the last mile of a journey. But in terms of addressing those opportunities, so an earlier question that you raised was around, you know, what are the issues that we face in terms of bringing innovation to market? And I think there are a number, but I think they're all solvable. I think one area is leadership. So as we're looking at new ways of doing things, we need to be bold and step forward and try new things. Innovation is an environment where you need to try. I'm a great believer in doing things. You learn from that. If it doesn't work, you try again, and you come up with a solution that does work. So there's a leadership element there. Skills have been mentioned. So we do have great skills. We have great opportunities in the UK with our academic base and our industrial base. We just don't have enough people with the right skills. So we have published, today actually, we're launching a review of the skills requirements in the intelligent mobility domain. Some fairly significant gaps, but opportunities for us to fill those gaps. So skills is the second one I'd come up with. And the third one, I think, again, it's been mentioned, is procurement. So much innovation occurs with small companies. Those small companies want to sell to cities and large entities. Getting through the door with the procurement rules and established procurement processes that are there is really difficult for small companies. And I think we need innovation in procurement as well.
That's very interesting. Just we're going to eat gently into your networking time because I think we've got some value here. We're all trying to export UK skills as well, because we can do it here, we can actually sell it abroad, and that's part of our charge. And it strikes me that taking small companies abroad need to have their hand held. They need that introduction here. Let's come back to skills. The article in The Guardian today, I think the FT at the weekend, artificial intelligence will get rid of every driver, electric cars will get rid of all the mechanics, we're going to have mass unemployment unless you're doing coding, okay? And everyone talks about a skill shortage, i.e. we don't have enough people. They don't seem to be reconcilable here. Is it because we have the wrong skills in the population, or education is wrong?
Well, okay, I don't think there's any simple solution, but fundamentally, I think systems engineering. So most things are systems, and I use the term systems in the broadest sense. Includes the human in the system. So the behaviour, how we as humans are going to adopt or not adopt new technology solutions, and again, that's something that we're testing. I think that the traditional academic approach to functional-based skills is all well and good, but we do need more people who have that system understanding, that system interface. We will need coders. There's no doubt. As we automate more, the coding challenge is enormous. And just to put a scale on it, the estimations of the number of lines of code needed in a fully running autonomous car is about 300 million. So someone has to write that code. Okay, you can automate some of that, but you need to test it, you need to validate it, and in virtual environments, because you just won't have the physical capacity to test that volume of coded information. And the human behaviour side as well, I think we need more capability in that area as well.
I was with GE yesterday talking about their new product, which is sort of a better ERP for simulation of cities. And do you see the Internet of Everything and the computing power give us the ability to simulate solutions before we do them? Is that a part of the future?
Yes, I do. I don't want to hog the panel, but I think very much, the virtual world, and there are some demonstrators here that we have today, is going to be a key constituent part of how we validate and assure ourselves that we've got solutions that
Chris?
work. Just building on the need for the sort of cross-disciplinary skills and simulation. So the work that we're doing with London is to develop a modelling platform that positively encourages people to work across disciplines. I think whilst the education system sort of pushes skills and disciplines in particular areas, I think technology provides a way to kind of create simulated worlds that many people can participate in the design and development of, and could even support the sort of complicated participatory planning aspects as well.
To get public consensus and speed of innovation, this is fundamental. Sorry, Miranda.
And I'll just build on the point here. We're going to be nimble in all fields. As more data is correlated and people play and simulate things, and then we're going to have to move into a model of privacy 2.0. I'm not very good at reading my terms and conditions. I realise that puts me in a gross minority in this room. But we have to move from tick box binary, you can have the service or you can't, to look, you can have my data, but please use it for sources that are good and don't allow me to be adversely affected by them.
That's interesting. The privacy issue. That's very interesting. I think that's a major issue. I think we've overrun by 5 minutes, unfortunately. So poor chairing from my side. Any concluding comments where we haven't quite solved the entire innovation issues in 20 minutes, but we're close. Ian?
Well, there's an announcement. There's a whole stream on cities of the future that's running in the sessions in one of the other rooms. So if you want to know a little bit more about cities, there's a sort of whole day programme throughout the day today. So it's worth stopping along there. My colleague Kelvin Davis has done a great job of pulling lots of different speakers together for that.
I mean, in conclusion, I think we should be optimistic. We have a fantastic opportunity for the UK, to make its own built environment better, more inclusive, more carbon efficient, more actually socially acceptable to people, with a public process that actually might work and a capital process that actually might reflect OPEX. We have the skills to do that. And we have investment in Innovate UK to allow people like these entrepreneurs and big businesses to come together with the public sector. The public-private sector interface is fundamental. Neither can do it without the other. That is where all cities thrive or fail. So apologies for running over. I've eaten into your networking time. So if we can say thank you to the panel. Thank you very much.